Welcome to DXgov governance discussion for Wednesday, December 1st, 1600 UTC. Welcome to December and happy fourth day of Hanukkah. Starting first with the proposal roundup. Let me share my screen to get us a DX vote. Quite an active week for proposals, starting first with mainnet. There's 4 proposals here that are all related to swapper farming. These were just submitted last night, and as with the first 4 epochs, these campaigns are being combined. There are 4 different campaigns being combined into one, so they will run over 8 weeks total. There's 4 proposals. So the first proposal is a funding proposal to send the swapper to the swapper farming relayer on mainnet, and then there are 3 separate campaigns being launched: the DXD ETH pair, the swapper ETH pair, and then the DAI ETH pair. So those hopefully will pass and be executed over the next week. And just as a note, I think we should be monitoring them, but it is pretty important that these proposals in, I guess, 12 and a half hours get moved to the boosted phase. So after a proposal has been staked above the minimum threshold for 24 hours, it can then move to the boost phase, but it actually needs a transaction to trigger it. So it's important that we're monitoring it. So I think myself and John, I think we'll be looking at that. And I think Nathan has set an alarm for the middle of the night. And then the next proposal just submitted this morning is the staking 1,000 ETH. So this is a proposal that's been up in the forum for the last couple of weeks. Dave's talked about it a bunch, and so there's a kind of plan here for to begin the ETH staking process, both in trying out 3 different groups here, and this proposal actually also sends the ETH itself to the dev multisig to complete that. So this was just submitted a couple hours ago, and will be boosted in a day. And then another fun proposal from Dave here. This is to transfer OWL from mainnet to XDAI. Dave, I don't know if you want to explain what the OWL is used for.
Sure. So this is actually for the buyback on GPV1. So whenever an order matches on GPV1, you actually require that each token that is matched, so if we're matching a WEF DXD order, for example, you need to have liquidity in the WEF OWL pair and the DXD OWL pair. And Geronimo has been kind enough to supply a ton of OWL in the past to facilitate that. However, we just have 10,000 OWL sitting around in the mainnet treasury. So we just thought we'd bridge that over to the multi-chain multi-sig, bridge it over to XDAI, and then we can just place some orders on the order book, and that way we shouldn't have any issues with the buyback. OWL is like the fee Gnosis takes in GPV1. So in GPV2, I believe they actually take a fee of the actual token that's being traded, but in GPV1 they always took OWL. So you always needed liquidity in the 2 tokens to facilitate a trade, which is really annoying in a way. But this should keep us up and running for a while at least.
And I imagine that OWL is going to be sunset in some way if they don't have any plans for it in GPV2. So it's probably good we're doing something with it too. And it actually be productive because it will enable WEF for DXD purchases as well. Cool. And then I think that was it for mainnet. So the swapper campaigns, and then the staking ETH and the OWL transfer. Then switching to XDAI, which I think we had, trying to remember the total number, I think it was like 15 proposals, a lot of different proposals here. You can see, just to run them through in chronological order, we've got a couple different buyback proposals here. I think there are 3 currently live right now. And just a reminder, these are only the multi-call proposals because the WETH has been sent to the relayer itself. And then, so we have a payment for retention of outside counsel, MME. This is from Tammy. She'd been posted about it, also involved with the Q4 legal budget. And then there is a proposal to withdraw the funds from the quick wallet scheme back to the main treasury. We'll explain this proposal in a little bit here. That's a discussion item there. And then there's a couple different contributor proposals. We've got Melanie's contributor, Sky, also my own, just as a explanation. If you remember on last week's call, I had submitted this proposal through the quick wallet scheme, but there were some issues with that, with the scheme and therefore the proposal. So this is a resubmission of that proposal through the normal contribution reward scheme. And as I said, we'll get into a little explanation on the quick wallet scheme in a little bit. And then there is a bunch of pending boost and pre-boosted here. I think there's an interesting proposal that was interested to see, which is to set the swap fee on XGen XDAI pool on Swapper to 3%. And I was surprised to see that there was an XGen XDAI pool at 3%. But I don't know if Sky, I believe you submitted this, if you had anything to say on the XGen XDAI pool on Swapper and your plans for it.
People now have a way to get XGen on XDAI, which most people need to use for governance. It's not a very big pool, but that's always a problem. And now if people need a little bit of gen, you can get some gen, but instead of like bridging it over from mainnet or something, you just use this pool, but there's a small fee because the alternative is to like get it on mainnet, do a transaction on a DEX, bridge it over. So like it's probably cheaper to pay 3% fee and get it on XDAI directly. And if that becomes a bigger pool, maybe we can make that pool bigger. Then it becomes useful. It's not super useful when it's this big, but I don't know. 3% was a little arbitrary. I mean, for like a small pool with a token that like only certain people use and it's paying to get from mainnet, something like 2 or 3% probably made sense. I mean, if people can vote on it, but there was no other way to get XGen other than going to mainnet and getting it yourself and bridging it over, which is more expensive than this. So we'll see if maybe this works.
Yeah, I think it's kind of to show you when like XDAI, when things are cheap, you can do things at very, very small scale and it be still worthwhile. I mean, you can imagine like everyone even keeping their gen in the LP itself, and when they needed it to stake or boost, they could just like withdraw the gen themselves and do it because it would be pretty cheap to do those transactions. But
totally
cool to see the swap.
One of the reasons why I thought of it was just because I have a bunch of XGen on XDAI, and I don't really have to use it all, but then there's nothing else to do with it. And so like if I want to sell it, I had to send it back to mainnet, which is not worth the cost because gen's not worth a lot, right? So that's, rather than just like sitting there doing nothing, I thought it made sense to put it in a pool and make it useful for other people. And then if that pool became bigger, then it becomes like a place where people can buy and sell it as well if they have extra or they have not enough kind of thing.
Yeah, and just so people probably know this, but the XGen does not go through the normal Omni bridge. So you'd have to kind of do that separately, unlike most of the other ERC20 tokens on XDAI.
Oh yeah, the other one thing is I really couldn't figure out how to do this using DXvote. So I had to use Alchemy, which is like a scheme in Alchemy specifically for this action, and which has been done many times before, and so it's easy to like replicate on Alchemy. I guess. Okay, I didn't realize it is a multi-call. It shows as a multi-call one. I didn't know that that's what the different schemes were on, like if you use Alchemy. But yeah, I guess.
So you can't. Yeah, just you can't do that, right? This is the same thing for even the swapper farming proposals on XDAI and mainnet that we actually been submitting the multi-call ones through Alchemy. I did share just a link that Dave shared with me, which is a way. I'm not even sure how to describe it. It allows you to like do the inputs on there and then get the call data itself, and then paste the call data directly in DXvote. So that's how you could do it there. But then you have to like do the contract inputs through this separate site. And I think the contracts also have to be verified.
Gotcha. Is that what Federico was doing with Carrot, basically? With the Carrot transactions we did?
Maybe. He might have like a more elaborate way of doing it. But this is cool. Actually, it's worth playing around with that next time, because it's like a cool, new way of doing it. So I think Dave has been doing all the buybacks through that.
Just for like future reference on this, I mean, if it was something that the Swapper Guild wouldn't implement, it's likely something we would make like a proposal type for in DXvote. So that would just be like a nice UI to do it automatically. It's like the plan for how we would implement this in future. But obviously that's kind of going to be covered by the Swapper Guild at some point.
Definitely. Yeah, so just to kind of close up the XI proposals, there is an updated Medusha proposal, and I think Medusha had the same thing as me in terms of submitting the previous one through the wallet scheme. So this is the same one resubmitted through the contribution reward. And then, yeah, there's the staking signal proposal that's also on mainnet. And then the last one that was just submitted, I think last night, is integrate Pocket Network into DXDAO product for RPC usage. This is one that we've been discussing the last couple of weeks, submitted from Sky. I think this is a good example of like obviously a great partnership and something we can do in terms of trying to use their products, but also how we can like solidify that through a signal proposal. And just FYI, the reason that everything isn't loading for me is because I just had to clear my cache like an hour ago. Yeah, the Pocket partnership there. I don't know if there's any questions or thoughts on that.
Just a quick comment. We've kind of like skipped ahead with DXvote, and in the QA environments, it's currently the default RPC, and will also be in the next release. So it doesn't. So if you connect your wallet, it'll still just use your MetaMask RPC that's set up. But if you don't connect your wallet, it'll be using Pocket Network on I think mainnet, XDAI, and Rinkeby. They don't have any Arbitrum support yet.
Cool. Awesome. And then no proposal, that's it for XDAI, and then no proposals on Arbitrum. And then, yeah, moving on to discussion items. So wanted to talk about the quick wallet scheme bug debrief. So Ross, I don't know if you wanted to take over.
Yeah, absolutely. So I don't know. Do you reckon I should share the document write-up that I did? I think that's cool. I'll share this and then just kind of talk through it. So it's just a Google Doc right now, but likely we'll make a Delta forum post about it just to make it a bit more public. So I think it was last Friday, we found a bug. Chris was sort of the one paying the most attention to proposals and what was actually happening. And so I guess I'll just kind of go through it. The high level is that there was an issue that caused us to not be able to edit the voting parameters in the wallet scheme, which obviously a bit of an issue. So the new wallet schemes is like the new architecture we've been using. I've kind of explained it previously in some of these gov calls, but at a high level, it's kind of like our new architecture that we've been using in. Initially, we rolled out on Arbitrum. It's what all of the schemes in Arbitrum are using, and the most recent one is the quick wallet scheme in XDAI. So that's the one we've been running the new contributor proposals through. So it gives us a lot more flexibility. There's more security there, because the actual funds can be separated from the avatar, so it can have its own treasury essentially, as well as a lot of extra security things that are specified in the voting parameters, like how much rep it can mint, etc. So yeah, the change that we had to do was we initially set the timing on the quick wallet scheme to 2 days boosted proposal, and we decided 3 would be better because it was closer to what the contributor reward scheme from the legacy DAO stack stuff was using. And so we changed that, and it went through fine. But then Chris paid a bit more attention to it, and it turned out it wasn't actually changing. It was still executing after 2 days of boosting time. And so we looked into it a bit more, and Augusto found the issue. So essentially, we weren't able to. It wasn't actually updating. It was updating somewhere, but the wallet scheme wasn't actually like pulling the voting parameters from there. So on the technical side, feel free to tune out if you don't want to understand this part. You can read a bit more about it here, or take a look at the PR that's linked in the document. Essentially, we were setting the voting parameters in the controller, but the wallet scheme wasn't properly like paying attention to those. It was just referring to its own local variable, which was set on initialization and couldn't be updated after that. And so now we, instead of storing it locally, we have an interface to the controller where we can go and retrieve that voting parameter. And so that can actually be updated via the scheme registrar. So yeah, you can read the document in a bit more detail, and there'll be a forum post on it. Going forward, obviously it kind of highlights just an issue because it's a bug. The important thing is that no funds were ever like at risk or lost. There's a proposal that was mentioned earlier to move the remaining funds out of the quick wallet scheme, just because we know it has a bug. We are moving the funds out of it. In theory, it could go on operating fine. We just couldn't change any of the parameters. So going forward, so there's like a few things to highlight. The first is obviously that we need some more solid testing and like QA testing, and as well as potentially some more audits. This has only been audited once, and it wasn't really like the scope didn't cover this, which is why it sort of slipped past the audit, as well as not proper testing in Rinkeby meant that we hadn't ever properly tested it there either. And so just a bit more, I think we'll be talking a bit more about it in the future, just how we want to make sure this can't happen again. The nice thing was that the way we've been rolling it out is kind of like a controlled deployment. So we tested first in Arbitrum, then going up to XDAI, and even in XDAI, we didn't deploy what we would call a master wallet scheme, which has access to the treasury. Because we deployed it just on its own with its own treasury, we sort of controlled the risk there. And so it's in a sort of silver lining is that it was found at this point and not when we'd deployed a master wallet scheme to mainnet, which has access to the full treasury, you know. So the second point there is just that the funds have been cancelled, and we've withdrawn the remaining funds from the quick wallet scheme, and the new version has been merged, and we'll be testing that on Rinkeby, and then afterwards sort of slowly unregistering the old wallet schemes and registering new ones, which we'll have to do on XDAI, obviously, for the quick wallet scheme, as well as in Arbitrum for the schemes. The nice thing is there's no huge rush to get it done, because we only need this fix for if we're changing stuff. Arbitrum, I think we're pretty happy with the current voting parameters, and so we do want to change it, but it's not like an urgent breaking change that we need to do right now.
Yeah, and I'll just add a couple of things just from my point of view. I think I'd echo everything Russ said, all well spoken there. And from my point of view, I think kind of in summary, we're probably just moving a little too fast on some of the governance stuff, which, it is contained to XDAI and Arbitrum. So like the risks were like, more limited because of that. But obviously the goal is to be taking on a lot more funds and a lot more responsibility with these contracts. And like Ross said, we have to kind of revisit some things and like improve our processes across the board there, like better auditing, better testing, think about the overall process, and just what I'm doing on the auditing front. So these contracts have been audited by Phil. I guess the scope wasn't included. I need to go back and look at that myself. But we are now, Phil kind of went MIA, so we aren't working with him anymore. We just completed an audit engagement with Omega Team, which is a few former DAOstack people. The audit looks great. This is just the intermediate report, so we need to address those. This is for the swapper farming contracts, the new version there. So we need to address the findings and kind of get the final report from them, and then it will be published. But I'm impressed with their audit, and I think we can engage with them further, and that would include with governance contracts. In addition to that, I have a services agreement from Sigma Prime. Now, Sigma Prime is one of the, for those who are familiar with the auditing space, I kind of view like the big reputable auditors are Open Zeppelin, Consensus Diligence, Trail of Bits, and Sigma Prime. Those would probably be like the big four that I would list anyways. There's probably others that you might contender in that group, but these are the ones that have been around since early days, have established a great reputation, and are just great auditing firms. With that comes a significant price tag. So I'll also be making a post kind of outlining overall auditing costs and what I think expectations should be around that, and people can kind of give feedback and whatever in the forum. But just to kind of give a heads up here, Sigma Prime charges $4,000 per auditor per day. So it's a pretty high cost. And we have the ability to reserve like 5 weeks of like basically 40 auditor days starting in, I think it's April or May. So I'll be sharing more about that. It's going to be a high cost, but I think for the most sensitive contracts, it's going to be worth it, in my opinion, to get probably 2 audits, including like one from Sigma Prime. And when I say the most sensitive, I think the easiest way to assess that is like how much funds do we think are going in them. So stuff that's going to be handling treasury funds, that's going to be in the tens of millions, I would put in that category. The staking contracts that may be handling tens of millions or more, and other contracts that could be handling that level of funds. So that might be like Carrot, Aqua, like those types of things. I think we could maybe even establish a threshold that says like, hey, above this certain amount, that's where we're going to really like commit our high budget efforts on auditing. So yeah, look, I'm going to be spending more time on this. It's kind of on me. We should have been doing more. I think out of necessity, we were kind of moving fast in some ways, but we definitely need to be doing more. And I'll be working with Ross and everybody to improve our processes across the board here. And just one last thing on the auditor front is that I just learned about this project called Spearbit, SPEARBIT. And apparently they've got some pretty well-known backers, and they're like trying to be like an auditing DAO, I guess, but it's more like a front office for auditing freelancers. And so it just so happens that the first audit that they did as a group was with the folks at Brink, who we have a relationship with. And so we know some of these Spearbit people might be able to reserve some time with them as well in Q1. So between Omega Team, Spearbit, and Sigma Prime, I think we could be in a pretty good spot on the auditing bandwidth if we're willing to spend the money, like starting kind of, in the next few months. So optimistic about that. I'm going to be spending more time on that. And yeah, if there's any questions regarding that, happy to talk about that more too.
Just thought I'd mention briefly as well, it's kind of going back to like the issue with the schemes. It's kind of good in a way if we can actually fix this and create like we need at least 2 audits, and then like just additional like QA. I don't know the best word for it. Maybe like workflows or things like steps that we need to before even going to production. Because we're going to go through the exact same steps for governance 2.0, and it's like even more risky in a way because there'll be bigger changes, of course. So it's kind of a good practice run, and it's good that we sort this out now and not when we're doing governance 2.0.
Yeah, I hate to see it's always scary to see vulnerabilities, especially when you feel like you should have caught them, but it is a good wake up call. And like the thing that I think we did do right is like it is contained, right? Like not too much was at risk. But yeah, need to improve on the QA flows and the auditing flows and just generally processes. And on the QA too, I think we're going to try to focus on bringing on a couple people. Space Cinch actually seems they have a QA engineer that we could bring on quickly. And I've been saying this in recent meetings, but QA is an important process in software development. I think for us, it's especially important because of the way our deployment flows work and our kind of aversion to analytics, or the lack of kind of decentralized analytics at this day and age, right? So in a Web 2 company, you would typically, you would have a QA team, but you would also have the ability to like, quote, hot fix something, right? Like if you see an error, you would be able to deploy the fix like within seconds, right? Whereas we have to follow a consensus-based deployment process, which could take days. And in addition to that, in Web 2 companies, you would typically have a lot of analytics, server monitoring, and we don't really have stuff like that. I mean, I think in theory, Web 3 will get there, but we don't really have that now. We don't use Google Analytics. We don't use like tools that would monitor like things going wrong, right? Like we can see errors when we're using it. That's sort of how we operate. It's pretty crude and kind of rudimentary. I do imagine in the future we will see better tools built around these kind of needs, but all goes to just say that extra importance on QA. And I think that's going to be another focus for us, is kind of ramping up our QA abilities. But yeah, I think everybody here, Chris, Dave, everybody's been doing a great job using the product, and like keep that up. Like that, this is also like an important aspect of security, right? If we all take it seriously as users and kind of keep an eye out for when things go wrong, do a good job reporting it, like keep that up. That's very important.
Yeah, because that is just what Ross said. I think there's like different layers. And I think like one of the things we probably shouldn't have done here was like maybe not do the demo to everyone and be like, this is almost ready to use, versus like we should have been doing that test ourselves, like trying like the proposal out. But like it's another layer when we want like other people to be using it. Just I was thinking of this because there's the Arbitrum, and there may be the same scheme stuff on Arbitrum. And I know that this proposal that just pasted in there, Ross, was I think changing some parameters. And so I'm not sure if that went through or didn't go through, but it might be.
Yeah, we can take a look at that. If it was changing the voting parameters, there's a chance it will not have gone through, or it'll have gone through, but it will not have. It wouldn't like apply.
Yeah, my understanding from Augusto, I got to look at it myself as well, is that we did test this, but the problem with how we tested is we just looked at the front end, and the front end is somehow not showing, like it's somehow showing success for the transaction, but
yeah, so the
updates.
It's kind of,
I got to look at this.
Yeah, the way I looked through the PR and like saw what the issue was. The issue isn't necessarily in the contracts, it's between like the communication between the contracts. So we're updating something on the controller and the scheme never like looks at the controller.
And then the front end is,
but the front end does look at the controller, so it's like everything's great.
You're like, oh look, we updated it, it's fine.
Yeah,
that's like a lesson learned there, right? Like that we didn't do a good job.
Yeah, and so the reason, I think, from at least from what Augusto said, I wasn't involved in the audit, but the audit was, the scope of it was essentially just looking at the contracts kind of on their own, and not the scope of, oh, the wallet scheme has to work with the controller. And I think that's why it got missed there. And yeah, so I guess on the testing side, we need to like consider more, not just what you guys are looking at, but think more about how the smart contracts are working.
Cool. Well, thanks for sharing. It was an interesting conversation, I guess, hearing all that perspective. And yeah, anything else on that? Awesome. And then,
I was just gonna say, yeah, there'll be more updates. I think, and we'll share that one as Ross is working on this. There'll be some other updates. I think we'll try to share more widely. But yeah, nothing here.
Yeah, look for a forum post, I think, in the next day or two there. We can follow along there. Okay, and then next up is buyback extension proposal number 4. Dave, I don't know if we have this as, oh, no, it's in the forum now. So let me actually just share my screen, and maybe Dave, you can walk us through what's a little different for extension number 4.
Absolutely. So as actually shared, I believe on the community call last week, we kind of updated the methodology of also counting how much we bought back. So now we actually take the amount of Ether we place the order at and the price of Ether on that day. So it should be a lot more accurate. And that gave a little bump as well in the buyback amount. So we're already approaching the 1 million extension. And there's a new 1 million extension proposal live on the forum. The one difference between this and how we've previously done it is that we actually thought it might make more sense to just take the current, to set the amount in Ether. So do 1 million at the time I posted this proposal. So it came out to roughly 215 Ether. That way we can just bridge the Ether from mainnet directly into the GPV1 relayer. And it makes it a lot easier to track as well, because instead of having to calculate, how much have we bought back at the current Ether price of USD or DXD price, whatever, we can simply look at the funds in the GPV1 relayer to see how much ETH is left over. And also the kind of buyback is somewhat driven by the amount of ETH in the DXD bonding curve itself, right? So it makes sense to account for this in ETH. It's still 1 million, right? Of course, Ether varies a bit, but 1 million at the time of posting the proposal. And the orders are still posted based on USD trading volume of DXD. So nothing really changes other than instead of denominating 1 million US dollars, we just denominated already in Ether. And that just kind of simplifies things. I know we've been trying to streamline the buyback process in the past to make it more efficient, and I think this is just a small step that helps accounting, helps with the oversight, and that's pretty much the difference compared to the previous proposal. So it's 1 million, which earlier when I calculated it was roughly 215 Ether. So I'll leave this up on the forum for a couple of days and then hopefully get the new proposal up as well. So we try to reduce as much as possible ideally we just overlap this extension with the current one, so we don't have to stop doing proposal and just keep the buyback up and running.
And then just one more thing, it's kind of, we've done this last time, is so this would be the signal proposal, right? So the signal proposal would go on XDAI in mainnet. And then the plan is to use this signal proposal on mainnet to also send the funds. I think it's a good idea in general as mainnet costs kind of skyrocket, is to be able to combine proposals. And then in this proposal, we would do as we did last time, which is we would actually deposit the ETH directly in the GP relayer instead of depositing the treasury and needing those separate proposals. But I think it makes sense to combine these proposals, like the signal proposal, into one, and then it's approving this, also approving the transaction, sending the ETH. But questions, comments on the slight modifications? Man, I thought this accounting stuff was thrilling. No.
Crickets.
Cool. So I think we'll keep this up for a couple of days and then look up for on-chain proposal. Awesome. And then last on the agenda is contributor UX check-in. Melanie, I believe you have some updates.
Yeah, I do. So, hey everyone. Hopefully this is a little bit more exciting than the buyback. Sorry, Dave. But I just wanted to talk quickly about the compensation overhaul. Chris, Keenan, Dave, and I have been working together and starting to reevaluate the comp overhaul again after it didn't pass earlier this year. We've been working on the details, and I just wanted to bring it to your attention here because we want to involve everyone early in the process. One of the main things we took into consideration after the last compensation overhaul didn't pass was the allocation of DXD in stables. After receiving feedback from the community and other contributors, we determined it was best to allocate more stables and less DXD for contributor payouts. In order to do so, we shifted the comp table to around 50 to 70% stables and 30 to 50% DXD for contributor payouts, as opposed to the previous overhaul, which weighed more heavily on the DXD. I don't have exact numbers to share right now, but just giving you a rough ballpark of where we see those numbers moving forward and how they'll weigh a little bit heavier on the stable side. In addition, to remain competitive in the market and also account for inflation, we've adjusted the contributor compensation range upwards a bit. So now the top salary range will fall around 218,000 annually versus the previous, current compensation that is around 168K. So we'll see kind of like a shift upwards, like I said, in the contributor compensation range. So it's also important to note that DXD will be locked up a bit longer as well to ensure contributor alignment with DXDAO. So now it will be for 3 years instead of previously, or how it currently is, for 2 years. Does anybody have any questions just generally about that? I don't know if Dave, if you want to mention anything about DXD and the burn rate. I know we don't have exact numbers, but.
How is the change going to be like? What is the new ratio between DXD to stables?
So it's going to be, depending on your level, it's going to be either 50-50 stables to DXD, or it'll be 70% stables, 30% DXD. So we're thinking if we shift to the 8-level compensation structure, like the lower levels will be about 70% stables and then 30% DXD. And then as the levels move higher, it'll go from 60-40 to 50-50 at the higher levels.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Also, we could think of what's the right way to state what a total is so that the optics isn't misleading. When you start at a company, say in Silicon Valley, they do give you stock options, but you don't say that is your salary, and it's not like you at the end of the year, if you need it for expenses, you're going to be cashing out or something. So I'm wondering if it's locked for 2 or 3 years, is it reasonable to count it towards compensation that is like advertised,
I think that's definitely something to explore. I guess one major difference compared to a traditional company is that you only get a payout if you eventually IPO, right? Like you're not able to offload the shares if there's no public offering or some buyback from the company, right? While in crypto, of course, tokens are liquid, right? But I think that's it's definitely something to consider overall in the verbiage, etc.
Yeah, definitely. I understand.
Yeah, are we talking about a complete overhaul of the compensation guidelines, or like more specifically about the updated payment structure?
Yeah, I mean, there's in addition to the payment structure, there are a few other things that we want to implement. Like, we're also interested in implementing like a biannual bonus system for shipping. We'd like to implement a bonus system that looks a bit similar to the proposal we saw earlier this year that you, Geronimo, and John passed for retrospective shipping. So this in this bonus structure, it would look like DXgov would set aside money, possibly like carrot tokens, and then allocate them accordingly, like twice a year, to those who like shipped and made valuable contributions to DXgov. So we were looking to implement a bonus system like that. We're also looking to shift a few other things, like the cadence of the proposals. So from like 2 months to 3 months. Also want to get consensus around maybe introducing product tokens into compensation. For example, Swapper in place of DXD. So I mean, there's a few other items on there that we're looking to overhaul, but I mean, I think the biggest one, like you said, is just the payment structure. So wouldn't be a complete overhaul, I guess. It'd be like a facelift, I suppose. But then also just get general consensus from the community if that's like something that is necessary. So I guess we just want to get the discussion going again.
Yeah, like one argument, like I think like the whole compensation guidelines document is a very like delicate rule set, right? Maybe it would be better for like finding consensus about all those specific areas if we actually like make proposals per like important area change, right? Like I'm not sure if it, like we saw with the last one, it failed because there was like one part more specifically on the payment structure, but now like a lot of stuff will introduce changes. Maybe we could like package it up in like 2-3 buckets. Like the payment structure is important, we should try to get consensus about that, and then like move on to increase the trial period to 3 months and stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely not opposed to that, because I think that there's some things that we can like implement immediately, and then some other things that maybe don't need to happen so quickly. So okay, we can focus mainly on the payment structure initially now.
Or I'm not saying like reduce the focus. It's just like last time. I think the goals from team were correct. There was just like one argument about too much DXD, and then like this whole thing kind of failed, right? Maybe it would be better if we like came up with a list of changes and then like try to find consensus per specific subject, and then change the compensation guidelines.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, if we were living in a perfect world, we would have those discussions in the forum as well, right? So at that point, I think we'd be more able to maybe divide it up, etc. Right? If there is a need to do that, but yeah, I think definitely once it's in the forum, I hope there'll be some healthy discussion and see if there are any points that are more contentious than others. But yeah, makes sense, I think.
I think important. Oh, sorry, Russ, or whoever that was. I think important related numbers I'd want to be looking at too when thinking about this are like the budget, the runway, and kind of like the inflows, outflows of DXD or circulating, impact on circulating supply. So, I mean, I understand that takes more work. I don't remember the last time we took a good look at budget and runway.
Yeah, I mean, we specifically took a look at the DXD issuance as well. I guess if there's an overall compensation overhaul that is also looking to, I think quite obviously increase pay. We're not looking to decrease pay, right? And on the other hand, we're also doing a buyback, right, which is constantly reducing the circulating supply. So if you purely look at that number, it's pretty much impossible to increase pay in DXD while also removing DXD from the market, right? But it's definitely something we're looking at, and something we'll also present more thoroughly in the forum post when it goes up. and everything else you mentioned, runway, stables, and some. I mean, these are also some estimations, given that the new model currently has 8 levels, right? So it also depends how people transition, and of course, the calculations will also be done on current headcount. But yeah, I think that's an integral part of it, and will definitely be part of the live proposal on the forum.
Yeah, and a big reason why we brought kind of Dave to help us work on this was so he could help us figure out those numbers and be able to present them well in the forum post. So thank you, Dave, for helping us. But yeah, so needless to say, we'll be putting a post up outlining all of the new parameters, and definitely encouraging constructive feedback, so we can come to a consensus on this and push a new structure forward, or the overhaul forward. That's it.
Awesome. And I think maybe we'll discuss more of this on the Contributor X call later, or kind of dive deeper in. But elsewhere, people should look to the forum. Awesome. That is it. Are there any other thoughts, comments, concerns? Well, enjoy your day. Enjoy December as we close out this 2021.